You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
This is Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and I want to welcome you to this episode of SLA Insights. I'm continuing to talk about some practical ways to incorporate output into the language learning classroom. In previous episodes, I've talked about asking good questions, starting with what, who, when, where, some either-or questions that maybe don't start with a question word, like, did he go to the store? So this episode, I want to finish off the 5 W's and an H in English with why and how questions. Now, these will move us more from meaningful drills into more communicative type drills. They kind of straddle the two a little bit. And just by a quick way of review, there are 3 different types of drills. One is mechanical drill, where the student does not need to understand what they're saying or what the question is in order to complete it. And there's only one correct answer. And these I'm not spending time on because they do not involve comprehension, which leads to acquisition. Instead, we've been focusing on meaningful drills, which also have one correct answer, and most everyone knows probably what it should be. But the student has to understand the question and the words that they're saying in order to complete them. With the what, when, where, and how, what, who, when, and where questions that we've covered already, these are primarily going to be focusing on questions that will end up with either a one-word answer or a short phrase for an answer. So really beginner type questions for the most part. As we move into why and how, some of them are going to be more in the meaningful category where there's just one correct answer. But they're really going to move us into the communicative type activities where there is more than one right answer, and not everyone will know what the answer to that question is. So as we move into the why and the how questions, keep in mind that these are going to be really good for follow-up questions. You may start with a what question or a who question, but then you can follow it up with a why or a how. So for example, after you've read a story, you may have a set of comprehension questions. What did the main character do? And then ask why. Why did he do that? Or where did he go? And then ask, well, how did he get there? And so these why and how questions can help expand and follow up and deepen the communicative interaction that's going on in the classroom. But notice that these are going to elicit longer and more complex types of answers. And so you need to be prepared to use these perhaps a little later in the sequence than you do the what and the who type questions. Another example, perhaps in an in-class activity, you might say, well, who has the object, whatever it is, the cup? And then you might ask, well, why does Joseph have it and not Paul? Or how did he hide the object? How did he put it, under his desk or whatever? And so these types of questions will again expand the interaction, but they are more complex and are going to require more complex answers. Now, so far, these have been fairly straightforward, maybe more meaningful drill type categories in that there's really going to be one expected answer for those types of questions. But you can expand it further into more like personal opinions. These really lend themselves to communicative type drills where, again, criteria, the student has to understand what's being asked and what they're saying, but not everyone is going to know what the answer is when it happens. So, for example, why are you taking Hebrew? What is your favorite Bible verse and why? How do you get yourself to class or to school every day? And so those types of questions are going to open it up more to personal opinion and to questions that don't have a single correct answer. It's going to depend on who's asking and who's answering. So these types of questions, and will lead to an activity I'd like to suggest. Could be a game, could be an assignment with a grade associated, called a scripted interview, where you provide students with the interview questions ahead of time. And these are going to incorporate all the question words, perhaps, potentially, that we have talked about so far. Who, what, when, where, why, how, either or questions, questions that don't have a question word at the beginning. So you would use the teacher, provide the students with the questions ahead of time. So, for example, where were you born? When is your birthday? Who are your siblings? Do you have a pet? What food do you like? Making sure to incorporate vocabulary and grammar that you've already covered, because again, output activities are review activities. And then the students will take those questions home and take the time to prepare answers to them as homework. And then they bring them back to class, and it's a live interview. You work with one student at a time, asking them their answers to these various questions. And you may not ask every student the same question or all the questions, but take turns in making sure each student gets a turn to answer the interview questions. But then in class, and you can prepare them a little bit for this ahead of time, you can ask some follow-up questions that perhaps they are not prepared for, but keep them simple, like, is your house big or small? Is your pet a dog? Why do you drive rather than taking the bus? Or when did you move from the place of your birth? You might even, depending on the time and the level of your students and their willingness to participate, you can even allow the other students to ask questions or ask follow-up questions for the interview. Because once you've done it a few times, they're going to get the sense of it and be able to engage themselves. And hopefully this will open up opportunities for output, not just in answering the interview questions, but perhaps later asking interview questions, and interaction to, again, start opening the students, giving them more opportunities for output and for interaction in the classroom. So, to bring things to a close for today, we've been talking about specific ways to promote output in the classroom using good questions. And we've talked about the 5 W's and an H: who, what, when, where, why, how. But you can also incorporate either or questions, or questions that don't start with a question word, like is he or did he. And we've talked about specifically meaningful drills. We've started with meaningful drills where the student has to understand what's going on, what's being asked, and what's being answered. And there's only one right answer to the question. And everyone usually knows the answer. And these are really good, especially for what, where, who, and when type questions, where you're going to get one word or maybe a phrase in response. We've also pushed into communicative drills where, again, the student has to understand what the meaning is to complete the drill, but there's going to be more than one right answer, and not everyone is going to be prepared. Not even the person asking the question is going to know what the answer might come from the student. And then again, by way of review, a few important principles for output activities in general. First, make sure that this is review. Make sure the students have been introduced to the vocabulary and the grammar, everything they need to complete the activity prior to the activity. They've had a lot of input-based practice with these vocabulary forms before you do the output with them. There's also the importance of repetition. Make sure you repeated it multiple times, more than you need, because they'll need more than you do, to the point where you're starting to feel it's redundant. But make sure that everybody understands. And that's my last point here. make sure you're doing frequent comprehension checks. And these question words are going to be great for that because you want to get into some specific points of comprehension, not just do you understand, although that's valid, but what did he say? Why did he say it this way? What does this mean? Making very specific and pointed comprehension checks that you do frequently to make sure everybody is following before you move on to the next, add the new vocabulary, their next grammar point into the discussion. So for the next couple episodes, I'm going to start looking at things like information exchange tasks, which will help encourage output, performance-based activities, and structured output. So I hope you can join me for some more ideas, practical application for how to get output from your students in a communicative, interactive, immersion-style classroom. I hope you can join me.
Χαίρετε πάντες, εγώ είμαι η Jesse και τούτε στην Zone Ελληνιστή. Hello everyone, I'm Jesse Orloff and this is Living in Greek. Σήμερον αναγνωσκόμεθα και διαλογιζόμεθα περί των ψαλμών. Και εγώ θέλω αναγνώσκην το κεφάλαιο 23 εκ των ψαλμών. Δείχνει νυν την περιοχή. Ψαλμός το Δαβίδ. Κύριος ποιημένει με και ουδέν με υστερέσει. Εις τόπον χλώες εκεί είμαι. Κατεσκένωσεν. Επί ύδατος αναπαύσεως εξέθρεψεν με. Την ψυχήν μου επέστρεψεν. Οδήγησεν με επιτρίβους δικαιοσύνης, ένεκεν του ονόματος αυτού. Εάν γαρ και πορευθώ εν μέσω σκιάς θανάτου, ου φοβηθέσομαι κακά, ότι σιου μετεμού ράβδος σου και η βακτερία σου, αυτέ με παρεκάλεσαν. Ετοίμασας ενώπιον μου, τράπεζαν εξ εναντίας των θλιβόντων με. Ελείπανας εν ελέω την κεφαλήν μου και το ποτέριον σου μεθύσκον ως κράτιστον. Και το έλεος σου καταδιώξετε με πάσας τας ημέρας της ζωής μου και το κατιουκίν με εν οίκο Κυρίου εις μακρότατα ημερών. Ναι, καλός ψαλμός εστίν. Τι γίνεται, λεπτά άφες με. Τι έγραψεν τούτον, τι έγραψεν τούτον των ψαλμών. Ο Δαβίδ έγραψεν τούτον των ψαλμών. Και τι λέγει ο Δαβίδ περί του Κυρίου. Ο Δαβίδ λέγει ότι ο Κύριος εστίν ως ποιμέν. Ότι ο Κύριος ποιμένει αυτόν. Ο ποιμέν, οι ποιμένες. Οι ποιμένες φυλάσσουσιν φυλάσσουσιν τα πρόβατα και δια τούτο τα πρόβατα ουκ υστερέσει ουδέν. Και εν το αυτό τρόπο ο Δαβίδ λέγει ότι ουδέν με υστερέσει. Και ως τα πρόβατα και ως ιυπημένες άγουσιν τα πρόβατα εις τόπον χλωές και ο Κύριος Άγιοι Δαβίδ και Άγιοι εμάς πάντας εις τόπον χλωές. Και ο Κύριος εξέθρεψεν Δαβίδ και εμάς επί ύδατος αναπαύσεως. Διότι επέστρεψεν. Επιστρέφω εστιν ως εν τε αγγλικέ διαλέκτο to turn. Και ο Κύριος εξέστρεψεν, λέγει Δαβίδ, την ψυχήν εμών και οδήγησεν αυτόν και εμάς επιτρίβους δικαιοσύνης ένεκεν του ονόματος αυτού. Ναι, ο Κύριος καλός και αγαθός ποιημέν εστιν. Καλός και αγαθός ποιημέν. Και μέλει ο Κύριος εμήν. Μέλει ο Κύριος εμήν. Ναι. Ένιωτα εμείς και Δαβίδ πορευτώ εν μέσω σκιάς θανάτου. Εν μέσω φοβερό. Αλλά ου κρέαν έχομεν φοβήν. Ου κρέαν έχομεν φοβήν. Ο Δαβίδ λέγει ου φοβεθέσομαι κακά εν μέσω σκιάς θανάτου. Και εμείς δυνάμεθα υπήν ου φοβεθέσομεθα κακά. Ου φοβεθέσομεθα κακά. Ότι ο Κύριος εστιν συν εμήν. Ότι σιου μετεμού ή, λέγει ο Δαβίδ. Και αυτός ο Κύριος, ο Θεός, εστιν μετεμών. Ναι. Ναι. Ως ιυπημένες ιουκαλίου. Ο Θεός έχει ράβδον και βακτερίαν και κρέεται τούτιους υπέρ εμών. Είναι είναι παρακάλεσαν. Είναι παρακάλεσεν. Ναι, τι άλλο λέγει ο Δαβίδ περί του Θεού, περί του Κυρίου. Ουκέτι λέγει περί του Κυρίου ως ποιημέν εν τούτο το στίχο, αλλά λέγει ότι ο Θεός ετοιμάζει τράπεζαν εξεναντίας των θλιβόντων του Δαβίδ. Των θλιβόντων των Δαβίδ. Ναι. Τι εστίν ελίπανας. Ου γινώσκω αυτέ ελέξ. Ου γινώσκω ταύτεν την λέξην. Step Bible. Ου γινώσκει ταύτεν την λέξην. Ελίπανας εν ελαίο την κεφαλήν. Εγώ είμαι ότι ελίπανας εστίν ως anoint. Ναι, και ελίπανας εν ελαίο την κεφαλήν μου. Και το ποτέριον σου μεθύσκον ως κράτιστον. Το ποτέριον μεθύσκον. Εγώ είμαι ότι τούτο λέγει ότι το ποτέριον αυτού πλέρες εστίν. Αλλά αλλά αυτή η περιοχή ου κρέεται το λέξη πλέρες αλλά το λέξη μεθύσκον κρέεται. Καλώς. Και το έλεος σου καταδιώξετε με πάσα στάση ημέρας της ζωής μου. Ναι. Μιμνέσκεται ότι ο Ιησούς έλεγεν περί των ενενέκοντα εννέα προβάτων. Τούτο όδε μιμνέσκει με περί ταύτην την παραβολέν και το έλεος σου καταδιώξετε με πάσα στάση ημέρας της ζωής μου. Ο Ιησούς λέγει ότι ο καλός ποιημέν, ο αγαθός ποιημέν ουκ αφιέται το εν πρόβατον. Αλλά ο αγαθός ποιημέν καταδιώξεται το εν πρόβατα. Ναι. Καλώς εστίν. Ναι, και εμήν, τους πιστεύουσιν εν το Κυρίο, εμείς οικέσομεν εν οίκο Κυρίου εις μακρότατα ημερών. Ναι, καλός ψαλμός εστίν. Ναι, τούτο εστίν το τέλος. Ευχαριστώ ημίν και
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.